Welcome to the Hearsay Culture Network, and welcome to another edition of R&D with D&D. I'm Dave Levine, along with my co-host Denise Howell, and we are very excited this week to have on Chicago-Kent College of Law Professor Ed Lee, author of the recently published book, Creators Take Control: How NFTs Revolutionize Art, Business, and Entertainment. NFTs have been all the rage, perhaps further rage by the launch of AI, but Ed has taken an exhaustive look at the very recent and very colorful history around NFTs and what they actually mean for creativity. Of course, we're going to get into what is an NFT, but also we're going to be talking more broadly about what creators do with them and how influencers work with them. We're going to have some questions about fashion, and we are on the close with our quasi-patented, at least common law, speed round, where Denise and I will ask very quick and short, and we're asking for short answer questions at the end of our discussion, Ed. We are recording on June 2nd, 2023 via Zoom. Ed, thanks for joining us on R&D with D&D.
Oh, it's really a pleasure to be here today.
So let's start off with the standard question, all right? What are NFTs, and why do you write about crypto punks? Who are they?
Well, I think the easiest way to understand NFTs is that they are a technology. They are computer programs, often called smart contracts, that create virtual ownership that is recorded on blockchain, which is just a public ledger, so that you can look up all the transactions related to this particular virtual token. And the most prominent uses of the NFTs, I'd say in the past 3 to 5 years, has been for digital artworks. And the CryptoPunks that you referred to is probably considered to be the Mona Lisas of NFT projects. They were launched in 2017 by Larva Labs before really NFTs took off. It was actually an experiment by the two co-founders of Larva Labs to test whether ownership could be effectuated on blockchain for these digital artworks. And the CryptoPunks are cartoon characters. They're pixelated characters that exist in digital files. And what the NFT does is to enable people to own the CryptoPunks through this virtual token, which it really is just a computer program that is keeping track of a record on blockchain. Another way to analogize it to is, imagine if you had a share of a stock in a digital file, like you own the stock. You are the sole shareholder of that digital file based on your ownership of the stock. So NFTs effectuate something sort of like that. And at first, it's really hard to wrap your mind around it. And in the beginning, as I said, this was an experiment. The co-founders of Larva Labs didn't know for sure that people would really believe they had meaningful ownership over the digital characters for the CryptoPunks. But just to tell you, the highest sale for one CryptoPunk was $23 million. And other elite or rare CryptoPunks typically sell for several $1 million, if not more. So I think
and we are going to get into those as well, which is why to jump in, and Denise has a follow-up question regarding tokenism. But you compare this NFT concept to trading cards, right? Baseball cards and the like. And you also tell an interesting story about Quentin Tarantino and Pulp Fiction in your book, where it was suggested to him that the stills of various scenes from Pulp Fiction could be NFTs. He, as you describe it, expresses bewilderment, and it leads to this question of, if Quentin Tarantino has a hard time understanding it, you can imagine how people that are not immersed in technology and culture and entertainment would get it. So how do those analogies help, and how do those analogies help the public understand what NFTs are?
Yeah, that was, I think, a very key moment. So Tarantino was at a conference hosted by NFT Now. And at the conference, Tom Bilyeu, the entrepreneur, was explaining to Tarantino about the possibility of tokenizing or making NFTs for stills from Pulp Fiction. And you're right, as I describe in the book, Tarantino expresses bewilderment initially, but after Bilyeu explains it and says, well, there's a difference between a digital file, which can be copied infinitely, and a NFT, non-fungible. It's non-fungible, meaning it's unique, because the computer program has a unique, line of code that distinguishes it from all other NFTs. And that is the way in which NFTs create this kind of virtual ownership. And, I know maybe it sounds a little bit technical, but I guess I would just point to the market that was established, especially in 2021, which was the boom when, people are buying artworks in the millions of dollars. The highest sale at auction, at a Christie's auction, was Beeple's digital artwork Every Days, and that sold for $69 million. So that sort of shows you an example where the investor or the collector believes the ownership of the token, the NFT, means something, right? I own what Beeple has sold at this Christie's auction.
The Beeple thing is a little bit interesting to me, because actually it's quite interesting to me, and I'm sure our listeners as well. For those who aren't familiar with it, it was sort of images within images, if I recall. It was very interactive. You would look at it from a distance, and it would appear to be a series of tiles of images, but then you could drill down on any one of them. And I believe there were multiple layers of it as well. So there was a way in which that $69 million piece of art existed in a digital sense, where it could not have existed as a printed out image. So that's a unique case, I think, to sort of bear in mind as we're talking about instances of digital art. You also write about a photographer doing a much more conventional kind of art. His name was Justin Aversano, and he did a very personal to him twin series called Twin Flames. And he was having trouble selling those works in printed form until someone suggested to him that he make them into NFTs. And he had trouble wrapping his head around that as well, why it might be valuable or useful to do that. And by the way, before I go on asking you about Justin Aversano, let's just take a pause for a moment and talk about, you referred to CryptoPunks as the Mona Lisas of NFTs. And for anyone who has not seen these things, I looked them up in preparing for the show. Please press pause, open your phone or computer, and go look up what a CryptoPunk is, and then consider the Mona Lisa, and consider that we're making this analogy here on this show, and how bizarre that is, and how equally bizarre it is that one of them sold for $23 million. I have trouble wrapping my head around that. I'm sure Quentin Tarantino would have trouble wrapping his head around selling one of his stills for $23 million. Right. So this whole concept is just sort of mind-blowing on various levels. But back to our photographer, Justin. He NFTs his works and has enormous success. So great for him. And one of the things that he got out of that, and again, back to Beeple, although his artwork was very conventional, it was imagery, there was a twist to this that made the NFT scenario work for him that would work for other artists and various kinds of creators as well. And that is that there is a resale royalty right that can be built in. So his works not only sold, but they've resold. And I'm sure that's true of the CryptoPunks as well when they change hands, correct? There's a resale royalty right?
Well, the CryptoPunks is one of the few of the top NFT projects which actually does not ask for or seek a resale royalty, in part because they were among the first projects early on in 2017. So that was not common back then. It became more common, I think, in 2021 with the boom, when NFTs were, skyrocketing through the roof.
So creators learned. And they said,
exactly.
yes, I can build this in. And whereas if someone were selling my image or painting out in the real world, I'm out of that equation. I don't get a cut of that. They can build it into their initial transaction that anytime there is a resale, they get a small piece, which is obviously very nice for artists. With the artists getting all that, what does the purchaser get? Why would someone want to own a CryptoPunk at any price?
Well, one thing I'll say about the CryptoPunks and the Mona Lisa is that they are widely recognized in the art world. If we are talking about digital artworks and NFTs as being the creme de la creme, the Centre Pompidou in Paris has actually acquired some CryptoPunks for its permanent collection. So like this is on the cutting edge, and we're beginning to see these leading art institutions realize this transformation with digital art suddenly, because now NFTs enable this virtual ownership of it.
Sure. So the Pompidou Center can own an NFT that they've bought. They can display it. Can they license it for other uses?
Yes, potentially, because in addition to the smart contract, there typically with a sale of an NFT is a copyright license or IP license. So that is something on top of the technology that should be included that sets forth the rights of the owner of the NFT, whether they can, for instance, commercialize it, monetize it, make derivative works. Yeah, I have another study that's coming out later this year that examined the top 25 NFT projects, which are sometimes called PFP projects, profile picture projects, like the CryptoPunks, sort of cartoon characters, and not people's singular work is digital artwork. It's not a project or collection, but of the projects, the majority of the top 25 projects, their IP licenses do grant the owners of their NFTs the right to commercialize the artwork, including typically making derivative works. And this is a completely different approach to IP than, let's say, the 20th century model would be like Disney, all rights reserved. We're going to really tightly guard our intellectual property, and only we decide sort of how to engage in the commercialization of Mickey Mouse, let's say. Whereas now, if you grant commercial rights to owners of NFTs, you are giving up control over that, right? You're giving up control over the monetization, at least in some respects. So it's a more collaborative business model than what existed in the 20th century.
Right. Or it can be. That's totally up to the creator, right?
Exactly.
So they can decide with each work how they want to license it, if at all, for commercial purposes by the NFT owner. And I assume that if you're going to buy something for $23 million and up, you're going to get some rights with that are being transferred by the artist.
Exactly. Now, and what's interesting about it, and things sort of change so quickly in this space, and now with AI, I think the acceleration with technology is going into warp speed. It's really a lot of volatility, but in terms of the expectations of investors or collectors in the top NFT projects, I think there is an expectation that they will get commercial rights. But then, because if you want to commercialize something, you're going to have to, invest money into that, developing the merchandise, let's say, or developing whatever use derivative work that you want to do. I'm not sure that everybody really needs commercial rights, even though that does seem to be something that maybe many expect for the prices that they invest in a blue chip NFT. So
Right.
today, at least with the current license for CryptoPunks, they grant exclusive rights to the owners of the CryptoPunks NFTs. So that's like, short of transferring the copyright, the owners of the CryptoPunks have the most sort of generous license possible. And yet I think maybe not that many of the owners of the CryptoPunks are actually commercializing them, but it's more of an expectation, we need to get something beyond the NFT, and we do, at least in theory, have the ability to commercialize them.
Right. So the copyright doesn't get transferred, though. The creator continues to hold that. Have you seen any examples of tension between a creator who, such as someone like Justin Aversano, who decides, well, I sold these NFTs of my photos, but I'm going to make posters of them and postcards and greeting cards and other things, and I'm going to commercialize them that way. That's going to dilute possibly the value of the NFTs because I'm going to flood the market with these things. I'm not saying that's what Justin did. I'm trying to create an example here that tees up the problem. Have you seen any tension along those lines?
Well, I should say for individual artists like Justin Aversana, whose photography is incredible. Typically, the licenses are not as generous as the projects, the startup companies, like the CryptoPunks were developed by a startup company. So for individual artists who are creating one-offs, it's more often that they are not granting commercial rights as the startup companies are doing. So there is a divide in approach. The clearest example of where there is a tension is actually with trademarks and less so with copyright. So one of the other sort of like big projects, most successful projects, is called the Bored Apes. And I don't know if you've heard of the Bored Apes, but they are actually still involved in a trademark lawsuit against an individual who had used the Bored Ape trademarks in addition to the copyrighted characters to do a sort of a clone version that the person, Ryder Ripps is one of the defendants, said he was doing to call attention to the racist and Nazi connections, allegedly Nazi connections with the project. But the court ruled that this constituted trademark infringement on summary judgment. And I explained this somewhat in the book. I also explained it in my forthcoming article. There is a reason why these projects that are more permissive with their copyrighted characters might file a trademark lawsuit, as what occurred in the Bored Apes context. It's because, as we know, as lawyers, you can lose your trademark if you don't police unauthorized uses of the trademark, but that doesn't occur with copyright. You can permit unauthorized uses of your copyrighted content and still there's no harm to the copyright, but there is this different approach in trademark law where there is abandonment. So in terms of, like, to go back to your question, Denise, the tension has been when there has been an unauthorized use of a trademark, and Yuga Labs, the owner of the Bored Apes, has on a couple occasions including with Arizona Iced Tea, which purchased a Bored Ape and used a trademark related to Yuga Labs on social media. And that's when Yuga Labs stepped in and said, can you, I'm imagining they just requested it, can you please do not use our trademark versus go ahead and, commercialize the character.
So I want to step back from the licensing issues, which are a major challenge, and frame NFTs a bit more around this broader idea of creators taking control because a lot of what we're talking about here is scale. And we've seen scale issues arise in the context of the internet. And so I'm curious how this technology fundamentally makes everyone an artist, because the notion of creators taking control is something that I think, for those that were paying attention to the early internet 15, 20 years ago, it was the same general point, right? The internet is going to democratize information. And I think you're making the same argument here. So I'm curious if NFTs are different than the internet, and if they aren't, what can we take from that experience?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we did have this creator economy even before NFTs became popular, I would say starting in 2020, 2021. I think the key in terms of creators taking control is that NFTs created an entirely new market for digital artwork that simply did not exist before. And why didn't it exist before? It's because the traditional art world did not recognize there would be value in digital artwork that could be easily copied without permission by anybody else. So how do you convince a collector to invest, let's say, $1 million in a digital file that somebody else can copy? Well, we know from our 5 minutes ago, our discussion about the innovation that NFTs created, it solved this problem for digital artists, especially, that there is a original, there is a unique embodiment in this virtual token now.
Right.
You can sort of point to it, as you could point to, let's say, the Mona Lisa in the Louvre, right? You here could point to your record on blockchain as representing you own the unique token for my digital artwork if I'm the artist. And to tie in this notion to the creator royalties or the resale royalties, that was one of the primary reasons why digital artists especially flocked to NFTs. Based on my interviews and based on other accounts, they realized that something that they lacked under US copyright law. The United States is one of the countries that does not recognize a resale royalty right for visual artists. 80 other countries do. Started in France, we don't have it. But what the digital artists realized is that this technology and contract could do this through private ordering. And this may sound nefarious, but it's not. It's not nefarious because the Copyright Office actually endorsed this possibility in 2013 when Registrar of Copyrights Maria Palente was in office. Their office issued a report backing the idea Congress should recognize a right to resale royalties for visual artists. And if it didn't, it should support private ordering or voluntary measures by contract. And the report actually lists or goes through several examples then where contractual provisions were effectuating resale royalties.
And
so
let me
we
just
know
and let me jump in just for a second and
Sure.
translate that for the non-lawyers listening, right? To who I am sensitive. To put this a little differently, the point is that people can decide independent of the law that there is value associated with a given NFT and create an arrangement for generating revenue or paying for it. And that is also something that comes from the internet, right? And how people monetize the internet. And so coming to that question, right, that issue of scale, is it the case that NFTs are truly, and you're getting to it, right, giving creators control, or is this just an extension of what the internet already empowered?
Well, I mean, I think NFTs solved a problem that was
Okay.
longstanding for digital artists that
Uh-huh.
the internet itself had yet to solve.
Okay, so what is that problem? in its
The
core?
problem was that there was no market
Right.
for digital artworks.
Okay, there we go.
Because
Yeah,
they
yeah.
could be easily copied online.
Yeah.
But now we have a new thing called a non-fungible token that establishes the provenance for a unique ownership of the digital artwork, et cetera. And the other thing that I would just add in terms of helping people understand why this is so revolutionary for artists, it's the ability, and you, Dave, you already mentioned this.
Right.
It's the ability to create financial sustainability because of the possibility of royalties, 5% typically, for each resale of the NFT that did not exist before before NFTs were created. And the ability to have some financial stability through the royalties was not something that visual artists in the United States had. And just in 1 year alone, resale royalties on OpenSea were over $1 billion to creators. And that was the boom year. Now we're in a crypto winter, so to speak. So it's down. But we know the potential of these resale royalties. The other thing I should mention, we've been focusing on visual artists, but this is not limited to visual artists.
Right.
Musicians,
Right.
independent filmmakers, other creators can use NFTs as a way to build, their patronage, so to speak, in what I call this virtual renaissance. You can have your own patrons, even for this podcast. Right. We joked about it a little bit before the show.
Right.
But that is where this is creators taking control. They don't have to wait for Congress to enact a right to resale royalties because they can do this on their own. Right. And that's what they figured out.
And Denise, these numbers are crazy. Yeah. I mean, this is what we've been talking about. Yeah,
it is. And we're talking up until now on the show about small creators like Justin Aversano and Dave and I, but you know who's going to really love a resale revenue stream is the fashion industry. Do you know what the resale fashion market is forecasted to be by the year 2027? That the original designers, manufacturers, sellers of the clothes do not participate in at all. The resale market by 2027 is going to be $350 billion. So you can just imagine Chanel and Hermes rubbing their hands, not the little guys, the big guys, going, hey, every time someone resales this NFT that we've somehow associated with our bag. By the way, here's this. Can we see this in my camera?
We can see
This is a real life, real world, non-NFT Hermes bag that is for sale on the Real today. I looked it up last night. It costs $475,000. This is a handbag that you put your snacks and your keys and your phone in.
But you could probably negotiate it down to 465.
You might.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is I am sure the fashion industry is salivating at the ability to participate in these resale revenues that will come along with NFTs. And Dave and I go back and forth about the metaverse and how important that will be or will not be. But having read your book, Ed, I think you're with me that you think the metaverse, even if people are backing off of it and don't really see the potential right now, the metaverse is going to creep into our lives in various ways. And before we know it, we're going to be using the metaverse it all the time. And we're like, I think you even wrote, people don't say .com anymore. And it's just going to be part of our lives the way the internet is now. And Dave, we had a little clip. Yeah. Can you play that for us?
Absolutely.
I think everyone's going to recognize this. This is from 1995, by the way.
Which is remarkable with the technology that we are about to see.
This is Cher, of course, in the movie Clueless. The dream, not just of being able to put together your outfit and then walk out the door, but as Ed writes in his book, put together your outfit, your virtual ensemble, and jump on Zoom or whatever your virtual environment is. And by the way, you two are both using some form of augmented reality during this podcast. For anyone watching the video, you both have virtual backgrounds. I'm sure lots of people, I'm not going to say whether I'm guilty of this or not, use the virtual touch-up features that Zoom provides. But I mean, a good deal of the population touches themselves up. It's part of their daily routine. If you say skincare and makeup routine to people who are involved in those things, they're going to tell you how much time that takes and how much they spend on it. And, I want to get together with Cory Doctorow and do a segment for his next novel where we discuss how laws evolve and people show up for the Oscars or whatever event they're at, and it's an emperor's got no clothes scenario. You're not allowed to look at them without using your augmented reality tools, whatever that may be, because you won't see them in all their digitally enhanced glory unless you do. So I'm just wondering, Ed, if you, like me, think the fashion and virtual reality portion of all of this is quite intriguing, and that Hermes wants a cut of that $475K.
Yeah, they actually prevailed in a lawsuit, their trademark lawsuit against Mason Rothschild. That was an interesting case.
It was.
And I think it's great to bring up the example about the fashion industry and think about the metaverse more broadly. And I think what in the book, what I try to do is provide people a big picture of these developments happening on the ground. And the fashion industry was one of the earliest adopters of NFTs because they recognize, in what the clip that we just saw, there is this huge burgeoning market for digital wear, meaning your avatar can wear, or it could be just your representation of your, physical self from a photograph, can wear digital or virtual clothing. So the fashion industry has already sort of gone full bore in trying to develop NFTs and to sort of trade or sell their digital fashion. And I think where this ties into the metaverse, and maybe Dave is a skeptic of the metaverse, as I try to explain in the book, I think the metaverse should be understood more broadly than maybe the media portrays it. The media, I think, fixates on Mark Zuckerberg's version of the metaverse, which was this Horizon Worlds avatar-based world, where we're going to engage in kind of a social media kind of context. That's really just one small example, I think, of the metaverse. I would define the metaverse as any world mediated through technology that takes us or escapes the physical world. And I would actually go back to the advent of motion pictures and say the motion pictures created a metaverse. Let's say Walt Disney, you name it, where people escape the physical world and actually immerse themselves in this imagined world of the filmmaker. And, now we live in an age where smartphones are so pervasive. and people are spending hours every day on smartphones. I agree with Megan Garber, who wrote a cover story for The Atlantic. We're already living in the metaverse. This interview is the metaverse.
Right.
More interactions online will be the metaverse. And, Apple is reputed to be coming out with eyeglasses in June 5th, or announcing it at least.
Mhm.
So, we cannot stop the radical transformation of society by technology with more interactions occurring through the internet virtually. That is something where I think the shift is just going to continue, if not accelerate, if, for instance, something like eyeglasses by Apple takes off. So with that understanding of the metaverse, I see, NFTs, and now with like ChatGPT, AI platforms, all like technologies that are a part of this virtualization of society. We're getting more digital content. We're getting more experiences virtually.
So I'm going to jump in here and play the role of Luddite, which, as you perceptively noted, may be a little bit of where I come down on this, maybe not wholly, right? So I have a few. I'm going to make this point very clearly. First of all, right, we've had all of this before. Is the shorthand. We had Second Life. We had there.com, right? I'm dating myself, right, into the mid 2000s, number one. Secondly, we've got this world of influencers and artist influencers who are famous for being famous. There isn't a lot of, pun intended, there. And then we can add the third point, and very quickly, just because you can imagine some people thinking this, and you look at this and say, while the technology is new, all the dynamics are the same. In other words, people are looking to make a buck. People are willing to pay for these commodities for the reasons that you've described. But at the end of the day, this metaverse place is a Zuckerberg pipe dream of sorts. And maybe people will buy it and maybe people won't. Now, I'm giving you the hard pushback, and we have our speed round coming up. But I will generously see if you want to give a quick response for 30 seconds before we start our speed round.
Sure. I'll just say Zoom. What platform we're on.
Yeah.
The key to having greater acceptance or mainstream adoption of technologies that enable what I'm characterizing as a metaverse is enabling something that is useful to, the average adult as well as to children, to the extent that we're talking about virtual worlds. But the uses that I'm anticipating will be popular for adults because they will provide us ways to do what we're already doing, but in a more immersive way and a better way, a more efficient way. So we could imagine, let's just as a quick example, and then we'll go to the speed round if that's up next. Let's just imagine that some sort of eyeglasses would be the way that we encounter the internet and ChatGPT and apps, et cetera, whatever. We wouldn't have to be sort of locked in to our smartphone. We wouldn't have to be staring at a laptop. And we've only begun to, I think, scratch the surface of how this might provide greater utility, right? If our experiences were through eyeglasses that are mixed reality, I think the potential there that wasn't before is it adds some utility to the experience that makes it better, more efficient, more dazzling, you name it, whatever the sort of goal is. I agree entirely, Dave. It needs to do something different than what we already have. And that's why I think, Meta's version of Horizon Worlds really hasn't taken off. I don't think yet it provides at least kind of, we're talking about the mainstream adoption. I don't think yet it provides something that people really need, right, at this point.
So we're
Yeah,
going to
the
go ahead.
example I've given Dave, as we've discussed the metaverse and what will become of it, is the example. You're both teachers, and how much you could do in your classroom if, aside from just using PowerPoint, your PowerPoint presentation, your keynote presentation, since, as you mentioned, Apple is about to launch something at us next Monday, could morph into something far more interactive and immersive than it is right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, like for a copyright class, you could actually have let's say it's a visual pop up,
Mm-hmm.
and it could be sort of analyzed in 3 dimensions, right? You can, if it involves something that was 3-dimensional.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to do our
Absolutely.
speed round here, as we've covered a lot of ground in what is already 40 minutes. So this is how we close our show, and we're going to discuss some of these issues in more detail in some of the additional discussion that we have for subscribers. We're going to ask you back and forth 6 questions, Ed, and we require the shortest, even better, 1 word if it's doable. It may not be doable. But yeah,
Probably not good at this. But
yeah.
I'm game for it though, but I'm probably not.
I don't think anyone who's a professor is good at this, but we'll give it a shot anyway. So here we go. Okay, I'm going to start off, and then Denise is going to take the second question and so forth. So we haven't talked about AI a lot yet, but we're going to talk about it in more detail, as I mentioned. So the job most likely to be replaced by artificial intelligence. There it is. That's the
I would
question.
say administrative.
And the least likely one, Ed? What's going to survive the AI job decimation?
Probably CEOs.
That sounds about right. NFTs, will they be commonplace in 3 years?
Yes.
And which one would you like to own the most?
CryptoPunks.
Best Tarantino film?
Best?
Best.
Pulp Fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And again, back to AI, can it be slowed down? People are talking about building in off switches. Is that even possible?
Yes.
Ooh, that sounded like a tentative yes.
I'm thinking of the 2 letters and the number of, but this is a longer answer, but.
Yeah. All right. Tentative yes, then. All right. Thank you so much, Ed. What a great discussion. You have literally written the book on NFTs, and I hope that we have made this less esoteric for folks that are interested in them or have heard of them. And what are we holding there? Oh, there's your book. There's your book. Yes. Yeah, so you have to hold it, I think, a little closer to the camera.
Hold it here.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Yep.
There it is.
It's the virtual version. This is the virtual version. See, for the metaverse.
It was looking like an NFT itself there for a moment. But of course, the book is Creators Take Control. Ed Lee, we've been so happy to have you join us here today, taking a break from your professor duties at Chicago Kent School of Law. You're also the founder of New NFT, which is a news site for crypto art, Web3, and NFT issues. Tell us more about that.
Sure. This was, it's NOUNFT.com for those who are interested in checking it out. It was the early effort that when I started seriously researching NFTs, which occurred after Beeple's $69 million sale. And that's when I realized I need to learn more about this. And the website was a good way for me to, stay on top of things, or at least try to, even though there's so many developments. And, eventually that helped me sort of crystallize my ideas and led to a few law review articles and then eventually the book. So please do check it out. I have information about my book as well, where you can find it on my website. So NOUNFT.com.
Thanks so much, Ed. And thanks, Dave, for co-hosting with the mostest. And we'll see. Thank you all for joining us. And as Dave mentioned, please subscribe to the Hearsay Culture Network if you'd like to hear more, you've heard of Overtime on Bill Maher's show. Similar kind of arrangement. Once you're a subscriber here at Hearsay Culture, we're going to ask Ed a few more questions and get a few more of his insights. And we hope you'll join us in enjoying them after the show. Thanks so much, Ed. And we'll see you again on R&D with D&D.
Thanks, Denise, and thank you, Dave. It was a pleasure.